Well, hi everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle. Good to see everyone here. Sorry we had to miss you last week. Been pounding out these scripts on the Soviet Union. The sound is not on. Okay, well. Anyway, just knocking these things out, and it's hard, it's a tough subject. So yeah, it's been pretty challenging, but we're getting there, and I guess that's that. I suppose. You might tell I don't have a whole lot of voice left, so I'm just going to jump right into the questions here. We'll get as many as we can get done. And then I will see if I can give this a rest here. Come on. Oh, Joy, come on. Do it. I'll tell you, the eyes are going fast too here. Okay, so questions for, was it 10, 6, 10, 18? That's weird. Oh, I see. Okay. I'm trying to catch up here. It looks like 10.6 was the last. Is there? I don't see anything for 10.13 unless it's... Nope. I got 10.18 Stratopop questions, so I guess we'll do the 10.6 questions. Boy, I am having a hard time seeing these guys here. Hang on a second. Move some of these guys around a little bit. You go over there. And you go there. No, I'm not going to need you today. Be gone. And let's see. All right, I think that's better. Tomorrow's the anniversary of the Battle of Hastings. I was rooting for the Normans on that one. I don't know why. Anyway, probably because that's what I was told to root for when I was in British schools. So here we go. This is the latest ones I could find anyway. And I'm just going to take them in order here. From Ian Nolan. Hey, Bill, I can't decide if this is a pop culture or a politics question. It straddles the line. Let's start. Band of Brothers, Hacksaw Ridge, Saving Private Ryan, the World War II movie genre has given us enough of a cultural marker that the societal consensus pretty much has the American spirit of that era being pure noble freedom fighters, and the Nazis are rightly condemned. I've long realized that there's a missing movie genre to really condemn communism. I'm your guy. Perhaps it would be to the U.S. World War II genre, like how the American gangster film is an inversion of the hero's journey, or perhaps it should steer clear of the wars altogether. What do you think the narrative format for such a genre should be, and what are the most ripe stories for this genre? I have spent an incredibly huge amount of time. I mean, I've spent 10 hours, at least 10 hours, on one subject alone, and that was how many people were murdered in the Lubyanka. I saw the movie The Checklist. I wrote a description based on what I'd seen because it was consistent with other things that I'd seen, and I wrote it as happening in the basement of the Lubyanka. And then I just started looking for photos of that, and I just couldn't find them. I couldn't find anything. I did find the first chapter begins in Google Earth, and we get to actually fly down and see these sites that are there today, right now in Moscow. That very first segment is called A Modern City. And in the course of my research, I discovered that that while there was an awful lot of shooting on the Lubyanka, in the actual Lubyanka, down the street about a half a mile on the left is a small courtyard, which was a Cheka garage thing. And the nice thing about this is that we just start at the Lubyanka. Actually, we start at Lenin's tomb, go to the Lubyanka, and then we can just pop. We'll edit it because it's a little slow in real time. Zip. We just go down 2 blocks north of the Lubyanka. And there's a completely nondescript looking building with a completely nondescript narrow gate, and inside that gate, scores of these Black Marias used to go. Oh, hey, thank you. I can never see this light green on this white. Great to see you too, Brian Woodbridge. Anyway, I knew I had the right building because there was a Russian flag on the outside of it, still owned by the FSB. A little courtyard, and inside that little courtyard, probably 15,000 people were shot. And you'd walk right past it. And then, if you come out of the Lubyanka and go the other way, just across the square, a third of a mile away is a building. It's currently got a tarp over the front. It's got a print on the tarp, but it's being renovated. It's a building that was known as the Shooting House. They called it the Shooting House because 34,361 people had their death sentences read to them in that building, and virtually all of them were shot in the basement of that building, which is just across the street from the Lubyanka. And when you look at it on Google Earth, you see all these beautiful Christmas lights that are hanging, and benches and people sipping Starbucks and stuff, and you have to ask yourself how many of these people know what happened in the building that they're leaning against. 36,000 people. And then I go looking for the bodies, which takes us to Butovo eventually, among other places. The Butovo firing range in Kominarka and one of the cemeteries in town. What I realized was that starting in 1936 at Butovo, which is just an open patch south, about 13, 14 miles south of Red Square, just kind of thing you just drive past every given day and not know anything about it. Inside of Butovo on the first day, they murdered 91 people, and they dug a ditch, and they lined them up, checked their photographs, shot them in the back head, kicked them in. And then they kept doing that for a number of years. The single biggest day there was 561 people, which is not a big number compared to Auschwitz or Treblinka, where a big day there might be 10, 12,000. But this thing started in 1936. Auschwitz became operational in 1940. So essentially, this was the first death camp, extermination camp. This was the first place that I'm aware of in human history where people were brought to be executed, murdered, and buried, and not just for religious reasons. Not a handful of people being strangled and chucked in a bog someplace. This was the first real mechanized murder pit. 500 people in a night, that's not too bad when you get right down to it. And I just, again and again, everybody's heard of Auschwitz, everybody's heard of, Treblinka and Dachau, and no one's heard of Lubyanka, no one's heard of Butovo, Leforto prison. So I was watching the checklist again because everything in the checklist indicates that it was the Lubyanka that they're working in. The checklist is, for those of you who have not been keeping up on this subject, which I mentioned several times on the Stratosphere Lounge, I think it's probably the most important movie in terms of if I could make mandatory viewing of one film in American classrooms, it would be The Checklist. It's available for YouTube in its entirety with poor English subtitles, but you'll get the drift. There's not a whole lot of nuance there that you're likely to miss. But I looked at it again because I wanted to make sure that this was the Lubyanka, and it's a yellow building in the big courtyard, so it's the Lubyanka. And so to answer your question, I would remake that movie, and I would make a number of movies. I'd remake The Checklist. I would do at least one movie about Kolyma, Gulag in northeastern Russia, where these starving intellectual prisoners were sent out to work in the gold mines at 50 degrees below zero. And at 40 degrees below zero, they said that if you spit, the spit will freeze in the air and it'll hit the ground and metallic sound like dropping a penny or something. The Checklist is not for the faint-hearted, and it's not a family movie either. There's full frontal nudity, and there's full frontal nudity, male and female, because they're taking bodies and just stringing them up on ropes and putting them in a truck, and just the machinery of it goes on. This is, I mean, as I say in this first episode, it's like I'm not, in order to make this happen, I can't use historical skills. I have to use whatever skills I have as an astronomer. How do you make people grasp large numbers? You know, a light year is 5.88 trillion miles. What does that mean? Nobody knows what that means. I don't know what that means. When you try and get it into a frame of reference, it does somehow seem just a tiny little bit more conceivable. 2,500 miles between LAX and JFK. So the distance that light travels in 1 year is equivalent to 2,355,000,000 trips across the United States. Does that help? Maybe a little. So this is the problem, and so the only way to solve that problem, 100,000 people killed in Moscow alone, executed over the course of the years. That's, Burbank. That's Green Bay. How do you get your head around those things? And there is no way to get your head around them. So, the strategy that I've taken on these series is to constantly go to photographs of individuals, constantly, because that is something that people can deal with, and it does give me a chance to tell in abbreviated form about the execution of the Romanovs, and they're kind of the first of the innocents, that were murdered, and other people, much more famous writers have said this about the Soviets. There's something comical about them. There's something that is just so incompetent about the entire system. How drunken they were. They've got 11 bodies and a dog in the back of their truck that they've just murdered, and they're driving out to dispose of these bodies. And one of the murderers, who was in charge of this, was so drunk he brought one shovel. They decided to put all these bodies into a mine shaft, and they dumped these naked bodies into this dark hole. And after a short time, it becomes clear that this bottomless mine shaft isn't bottomless, it's only 9 feet deep. So you got to post a guard and come back the next day and throw a rope around them and pull them out and take them to a deeper mine shaft. But then your truck breaks down and gets stuck in the mud. And now the sun's coming up and everybody's drunk and hungover and nobody wants to follow orders. So we just dig a big, wide, 2-foot deep ditch, just flat, lay the bodies down, put some railroad ties over it, run over it with the truck, and get the hell out of there. The one of these writers, I want to say it was Martin Amis, I think, said something that really is profoundly true, I think, about the Soviets versus the Nazis. He said that the Nazis didn't do their worst. And what he meant by that was the whole regime lasted 11 years, and the total actual mass murder years, maybe 4 or 5 years. The Soviets lasted for 78 years. He said Stalin was a psychopath with patience. And there's something to be said about that Stalin did his worst. That society did its worst. It killed 20 million people. And just again and again and again and again and again and again and again, I just keep coming back to these numbers, and this is the tone I'm trying to take with this, This is Moscow today. I mean, I got the pins on Google Map, and we'll go have a look at them. And if you want to look up Petovo, south of Moscow, about 14, 15 miles south of Red Square, it's just a square patch of forest, but there's 60,000 people buried there. And American cities aren't like that. American cities don't have 60,000 nameless bodies buried in parks and fields. So I would do that, and I would like to take the people that still defend this system. And I don't really know what would be appropriate. I kind of think I know for a fact I'd go much easier on the students than I would on the teachers. But even in the Czechos, there's people defending this, saying, this is, propaganda, or not even denying it. Just, so we killed a lot of innocent people. We killed a lot of guilty people too. Okay. It's a genre, Ian, that should have been dealt with the minute we found out about these things. And that's another thing, by the way, the number of Westerners and intellectuals who covered for this regime, not only covered for them, but covered for them fully aware of what was going on. That's a special kind of thing. Okay, let's see. Moving on. Chris Taylor. Bill, what would you recommend as either a short vacation spot or relaxation activity for someone who was overstressed and needed to play hooky for a day or two and come back refreshed with his motivation and sense of perspective restored, ideally somewhere within a day trip of LA? There ain't no such place. Is that true, Quibo? Bill Burr said that capitalism's killed more people than socialism. Did he really say that? Because if he did, I'm just gonna cry. You heard it from him, or you heard that he said it? Did you actually see him say it? One of the things that Lenin tried very hard to do was to constantly put roadblocks in the way of the American relief mission. When the Soviets were starving, they had two famines in the Soviet Union, one in 1921-22, and then the the super big one in the 30s. And during the first one, Lenin was doing his very best to make sure that the American relief mission was blocked at every opportunity, but they couldn't block it. An American, so everybody knew that there was this famine in the Soviet Union, and the United States sent over not only bags of food, but an army, sent over a small army of people. And how long is that, Marusha? Can you tell me? Anyway, the American effort saved 10 million Russian lives. The capitalists went over to the socialist utopia and saved 10 million lives. I don't care anymore. All right, Bill, I'm done with you, Bill. That's a shame because you were actually one of the few people left that I actually thought was, somewhat immune to this kind of thing. I really did think you were a guy who thought for yourself, but I'm not going to watch it. I don't need to have yet another source of entertainment or relief destroyed. I just take your word for it. I know it's true. So okay, F you, Bill Burr. You want to make a statement like that? You go right ahead. Killed more people than socialism did it. Well, Bill, we could take a fucking shovel and we could go to downtown New York City and start digging in Central Park and see which one of us comes up with the most bones first. I got a couple fields you could start digging in. God almighty, okay. That's just, all right. All right, Martin Archer. I don't have a place. There is no day trip anywhere near me, and I just don't know. So Martin Archer, all this talk of Democrat voting blocs like blacks and Latinos switching to Republican for the upcoming elections is just wishful thinking. The Dems will cheat again all over. Why do you think California has been solid Dem since the last real Republican governorship? They've stolen votes there for decades because of the big electoral vote they get. It's not rocket science. We are governed by commies and have been for years, and commies cheat votes because they have to. Okay. Well, all right then. Marusha Dark, topic, China. Given China's preoccupation with the idea of saving face, what if we could send a message to because that last wasn't even a question, it was just a statement. So your statement has been duly read, Martin. Given China's preoccupation with the idea of saving face, what if we could send a message to the Chinese people? In fact, why waste time? Why not just shoot ourselves? Since all of this can't win, everybody's cheating. It's all wishful thinking. Why don't you all just jump off a frickin' bridge? Given China's preoccupation with the idea of saving face, what if we could send a message to the Chinese people appealing to their sense of patriotism and identity, acknowledging their rich history and culture while saying that the CCP has done nothing but bring shame and dishonor to that ancestral legacy? Literally using those two words, shame and dishonor, would that resonate with them? Do you think, would they believe it? Yes, I think so. The problem then becomes, how do you get such a message past the Great Firewall of China? And I have an idea for that too. I know you're a fan of drones, so supposing we launch an army of drones over Chinese airspace that were programmed to emit vapor trails, writing messages in the sky, or perhaps we even have the technology to make crude holograms like the kind used in Mysterio and Spider-Man Far From Home. It wouldn't have to be complicated, just write the message out in Mandarin, talking about the crimes of the CCP, saying that the world will be welcome the Chinese people back with open arms if they simply rid themselves of this communist blight. I doubt if there's anything the CCC could do to stop it. They might well try to gaslight the population or even retaliate against it, but by that point we'd have broken through the average person and the message will have been received, which seems like the most important element in dismantling any totalitarian state, to try to find a way of the planet to plant the seeds of liberty. Obviously, given the gravity of such an act, this is not something to consider lightly. And for our YouTube overlords, I'm only posing it hypothetically. You've got two problems with this idea. One of them is there's 1 billion people there, and they're not all sitting there in a stadium waiting for the drone show. And the other problem is that drones do not have international range. If you're going to do something with a drone, you generally have to be within line of sight or close enough to it. And so the only people that can get this message to the Chinese people are other Chinese people, or an American who arrives in Beijing with, 750 million drones in his luggage. The idea is something that is going to have to come from China. If it doesn't matter what. Look, I'm watching the Russian people getting all nationalistic behind Putin because he's saying it's defense of the motherland and the Rodina, and significant numbers of Russians are buying into that. Once you start to, Marusha says, deploy them from a high altitude plane over a city. Well, that's not something I don't think the Chinese would mind too much if we did, really. I think maybe we'll just charter a couple of United 747s and we'll just fly them over Beijing, drop a few thousand drones out of the air, and better to ask forgiveness and permission. So if it turns out they're not totally cool on the idea of us dropping drones over their city from airplanes with messages talking about deposing the CCP, then I suppose that they would write us a sternly worded letter. The thing that seems pretty clear to me is that you cannot inject a desire for freedom into people, and even if you could, you can't free the Chinese people or the Chinese people's minds by remote control. In fact, it's like, this is why I have such a problem with open borders. I mean, from a philosophical point of view, if it were impossible for people to create their own free societies, like this thing was, like the U.S. was put here on the earth in a as a flying saucer of freedom, and here's where it landed, and it's the only one available, and that means that you either get on that lifeboat or you don't, then I would have a much more difficult moral quandary. But the fact of the matter is that we don't keep the Constitution under the wording of the Constitution is not a state secret, let's put it that way. And neither are any of the other aspects of the government. You can go right now and find the U.S. Constitution, read it, and implement it yourself if you want to. And if you're not inclined to do that on your own, then I'm not entirely sure that the system will work. You see, this system, the thing that people don't really ever seem to get about the Constitution, people think that on some level that the Constitution makes the country, but the truth of the matter, it makes the people is probably better. That we are the kind of people we are because of the Constitution. Well, there's true, but the Constitution is the way it is because of the kind of people that wrote it. And that's the thing that nobody seems to be able to get a firm grasp on. You cannot graft these ideas onto people and expect that it'll take, because it won't take. This is a lesson that we learned in the first part of this century. That the longing for freedom is universal, generally speaking, but the willingness to do the hard work necessary for it is not. And that was a heartbreaking thing to discover, but nevertheless, there it is. You get what you pay for, and you pay for what you get. And if something is handed to people, then it essentially has little or no value. So I remember when they had the first election in Iraq, and those people were risking being killed by insurgents in Al Qaeda, and had their purple fingers, held those up. I said, "All right, that's it. We did it. That's what we wanted to see, what we wanted to believe." And no. Now, the real question there is, did that fail in Iraq and Afghanistan because it was bound to, or did it fail because we weren't completely committed to it? And what I mean by that in two examples is, number one, in Iraq, when they wrote the Iraqi Constitution, they wrote Sharia law into the Constitution. And we said, well, it's your Constitution. Okay. That's not what MacArthur did. MacArthur essentially wrote the Japanese Constitution by hand. And MacArthur, having seen the cost of defeating Japan, wasn't about to write a constitution for Japan that gave the military unlimited power to lop off people's heads and have, ultimate autocracy, vested in the emperor. He kept the emperor because he thought it was socially cohesive glue, and he didn't want to deal with what would have happened if he'd gotten rid of him. But he made him an absolute figurehead, and he just wrote the Constitution that turned Japan into a modern, free, Western power with individual rights and ownership of property, a robust and fair legal system. He didn't go in there and then say, "Okay, we win. You have to write a constitution. You lost, and now we're gonna pull you up into the realm of civilized people, and then let them write a constitution that totally destroyed that. We had a much clearer vision of reality back in those days. But in 2000, and what was it, 5 or 6, is what we did in Iraq, and we did the same kind of thing in Afghanistan when it turned out that we had some of our soldiers who physically went in and prevented young boys from being raped by tribal chieftains, chucked out of the army, charges brought against them, and that kind of thing. In other words, you've got this battle, ideological battle. We have soldiers there that are supposed to be representing our civilization. These soldiers see something's been going on there for thousands of years, and they see and hear these boys being raped by these village elders, and they decided to do something about it. And they got into a lot of trouble over it. So, was that a failure of America's policy, or was that a failure of America's political leadership, which didn't want to go the distance, right? You got all this blood and treasure spent, and money and effort and all of this turmoil to get to this place. And when you get to this place, you don't want to cross the last T's and dot the last I's. You go there talking about freedom and civilization and law, and you've subdued the country militarily, and then when push comes to shove, you're I think it's even then it was just a form of leftism, right? Well, yes, we've taken over the country, yes, and now, yes, but we don't want to force our values on them. Yes, we do, but we didn't. That's where that kind of political correctness got in there and said, who are we to tell these village elders that have been raping small boys ever since there's been in Afghanistan. Who are we to tell them how to run their lives? Or we don't want to lose their cooperation or whatever. It's one or the other, right? You either are going to accept the fact that that's their culture and that's what's going on, and you watch it from a distance, or if you decide to prevent Afghanistan being used again as a base for terrorist operations, and you decide you're going to go in there and kick open that hornet's nest. Well, if you do that and then squash all the hornets, and then you stop at the moment where you are at the moment where you have to stand up for the reason you went there in the first place, for your values, then you get what you deserve. And for those people who say that it's impossible to have a modern society in Iraq or in Afghanistan, I would refer you to travel brochures from the 1950s and 60s. There's a travel brochure for Kabul, Afghanistan, and you see all these beautifully maintained streets with flower beds, and then here's a picture of what it looks like today, and it's completely bombed out rubble with nothing but dirt. Here's a group of Iraqi women walking down the street in miniskirts, laughing and cheering, having a fine old time, and they're going off to their university to study medicine or whatever the case may be. All of these things were in place and working just fine before Ayatollah Khomeini came along and did that, right? So it's not like it's impossible. It's just you're going to have to do it yourself. And see, this is when it's funny because I supported both of those wars, and I still do. And even though the reasons, this business of building republics where all of this tyranny was, I still support them because of the number of enemy combatants that were killed in Iraq and Afghanistan. There's 100,000 terrorists that are dead in the ground because of our soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan. And if they weren't in the ground of Iraq and Afghanistan, then they'd be here at the shopping center. Now that is beyond dispute as far as I'm concerned. But with that said, you had an opportunity, and look, it's like we don't know how Iraq could have ended. All I know is that when the surge happened and everything started to go right, and then the last 7 months of Bush's presidency, I don't think there was a single soldier killed in Iraq. And then along comes the Obama administration, and they can't even sign a simple a SOFA agreement, state of something or other. He couldn't even sign a fundamental agreement to keep bases there. We have bases in 175 locations around the world or something like that. Okay. And that's when I realized it doesn't matter what we do or how successful we are on the battlefield, even how successful we are in the school rooms over there. As long as the Democrats are here, they will undo it. The Vietnam War ended exactly the way as it started, with the North Vietnamese up above the parallel and a independent South Vietnam. That's what Vietnam looked like when we got there, and it's what Vietnam looked like when we left. Their status of forces agreement, thank you. The North invaded the South. We went and stopped them and fought awfully for 5-6 years, and suddenly we didn't fight awfully, and then all right, then we get the peace agreements, and they're back behind the line. Same as Korea. And then comes Watergate, and then comes an election, and then the Democrats just give it away. They just give it away. Ukraine had an incredible number, I don't know what the number was, of nuclear weapons of their own. And we told Ukraine in the 1990s, Bill Clinton told Ukraine in the 1990s, we give you our word. I'm giving you my word. Well, it turns out that Bill Clinton's word is not worth an awful lot, and neither is the word of the United States of America either. We gave our word to a lot of people in Afghanistan, too. And some of those were the people we saw dropping out of those airplanes, hanging on to that promise that we made them as the promise goes sailing off into the wild blue yonder. And my feeling now is that if we cannot keep a fundamental promise to anybody because of our ever-changing political perspectives, then we shouldn't be making promises. Ask me no questions, I'll tell you no lies. And I don't like living in a world this cynical, and I don't like living in a world that where this country is so. It's not even something to pity. It's something to look at with just genuine amazement. Like it's like looking at a cigarette tray or an ashtray or something. Just seeing one of those would be wonderful or weird enough anyway. It's like watching a coffee mug stand up, hop off of the countertop, and then turn towards you and then belt out, MAME, and sing a show tune right there on your countertop. You just look at it in amazement, like, how is this possible? How can this possibly be happening? That's what I feel like now when I watch the President of the United States or the Vice President of the United States or the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And, when Donald Trump said to Vladimir Putin, Vlad, you go into Ukraine and I'm gonna hit Moscow. Well, he didn't go into Ukraine when he said that. And I don't know if you've seen the quote, I'm sure most of you have, where Trump was talking about dealing with China, and he said, look, this is easy. You want to stop this? It's easy. I'm going to slap a 25% tax on China, on their imports. And I'm not going to send somebody who says, we're going to slap a 25% chance on you. I'm going to send somebody who says, we're taxing you 25%, you MFer. And he didn't say MFer. And I thought, and then okay, great. It's difficult to see things that so clearly and then to just be overwhelmed by numbers of people who they just won't look at it. It's really gut-wrenching. However, Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, if you are speaking a word of truth, that outweighs the rest of the world. I thought, that's not badly put. So there you go. I often talk about the show I just did with Zoe because we do the Stratosphere Lounge on Thursday nights. We shoot Virtue Signal on Thursday afternoons, so this stuff is fresh in my mind. I was trying to think about what it's going to take for people to stop voting for these people. I was dealing with the situation of the crime rate in New York. A subway murder rate is higher than it's been in 40 years. Chicago's murder rate, all of these murder rates going through the ceiling. And I was dealing with trying to come to grips with this question of what's it going to take for these people to change their mind. Because clearly California hadn't been hurt enough to recall Newsom. Los Angeles hadn't been hurt enough to recall this George Soros city attorney. So the beatings will continue. And the question is, how long will they continue? And we're going to find out in about 3 weeks, I suppose. But I kept trying to come to grips with what is it about what's the dynamic? And I realized that the real dynamic going on out there right now is the sunk cost fallacy. That's really what it comes down to. I'm sure that's 80% of the psychological driver of why this stuff has to keep getting worse and worse and worse, and why people don't wake up and change their minds. It's sunk cost fallacy. Those who aren't familiar with the concept, basically what the sunk cost fallacy says is, well, I had this idea and I thought it was going to be a good idea. So I put a ton of money, effort, time, and work into it. It's not working, but since I've got so much effort into it, I have to keep going in order to recover that effort. I'm pot committed now. I have no other way around. I have got no choice. And the antidote to the sunk cost fallacy is the act of cutting your losses. And now you begin to see where the adults are, right? Where are the adults? Because an adult can look at a situation and say, I just gambled away my kid's college fund. I'm down $60,000. Most people would say, well, you can't walk away from the table down $60,000. You've got to keep playing until you get your $60,000 back at least, right? But an adult can say, no, this is a losing proposition. It always is a losing proposition. If it wasn't a losing proposition, there would be no casinos. So I'm down $60,000, and now I'm going to cut my losses and walk away, because if I don't, I won't be down $60,000. I'll be down $400,000, and that means we will lose the house as well as the college education. The sooner I walk away from this table, the sooner I can start earning back the money that I just blew. That's what adults do. But it's so much of this is the reach of social media, you know. If you changed your mind like I did on politics, that wasn't national news. That didn't affect hundreds of people. I didn't get, when I started becoming a conservative, I didn't get hundreds of hate mail messages. That's what happens if you do it now. So this social proof is much higher now. Now, if you decide that you're going to cut your losses and change your political philosophy based on the fact that what you voted for isn't working, now all of your friends are gone, and all of the vitriol and all of the hatred and all of the stuff that comes out for people who leave the flock, that's all on you now. And so, this we're in so much of what we're doing is in not just humanity has never been where we are now. I'm not going to read the stuff about the stuff I've already talked about. We are no one's ever been here before, and this thing, this thing is like, this is it's kind of, if you think about it, it's a little strange. If you think about the total lifespan of humanity, including whatever is yet to come, and you realize that ownership of one of these devices really is only managed well by a group of people that are born in a 15, 20-year window. The only people that I know who things like the smart device provides more benefits than harm are people who grew up without smart devices. And so now it's all, I can find out what my bank balance is, or I can look for that quote I've always wanted to know. But everybody coming after us, their brains are different. And I'm not impressed so far. The one thing I've noticed about these TikTok videos, especially watching some Voden's stuff, it's just soothing to me to watch him break these things down. But TikTok to me seems to be, of all the things about the people that are wrong about so many things, like Bill Burr, for example, of all of it, it's the lecturing part. It's the, here's why you're a racist. Here's why you're fat phobic. I'm here to tell you what's wrong with you. And I saw a couple of them on the way in, it's like, that's fat phobic. And if you think that, then that's because you're fat phobic. And I realized, I guess I'm fat phobic then. And this is the worst thing in the world, right? It's the worst thing in the world you can be is a phobe or an ist. This is why I miss Norm Macdonald so much. And he did a little bit of the apology tour, but of all the things that Norm Macdonald said, and he said so many brilliant things, my favorite the funniest thing he ever said from a philosophical point of view, he said, he was talking about Bill Cosby, and people were saying, the worst thing about Cosby is the hypocrisy of it, just the hypocrisy of it. And Norm said, that's funny. I thought the worst part of it was the rape. And the genius of that, right? Just the genius of it. Well, he said something that hurt my feelings or changed me. Yeah, okay, but I thought the actual raping part was worse. And this is it, right? It's like, you could ask these TikTok people, do you think it's worse to be a racist or a murderer? And they'll tell you racist every time. This is a provable theory, because if you were tied up against a wall and somebody's got a knife at your throat or at your gut, and then they say, would you rather that I shove this knife between your ribs, or would you rather that I call you by a racial epithet? Which one do you want? I would take the racial epithet than a knife in the guts. But that's the value system we have now. So what do you get for that? Here we go. Road Rider. First, Bill, was Sabo effective? Sabo, I guess. From Sabbath, same source, I think. I loved what this ingenious agitating artist did in the past. For those of you who don't know who Sabo is or was and what he did, not likely you can Google it, but perhaps you, Bill, can elaborate on who and what and if, in hindsight, he was effective. And second, you are being a little bit Sabo-ish with Dias for Dungeon. Can Sabo-style agit art still be effective if for some reason without 5,000 of us began to create banners and bus stops or under stop signs or near ATMs, etc.? Third, can you imagine what the FBI would do to Sabo if he were to strike now? That's cheering. And thanks for everything you do. Thank you very much, Road Rider. And, okay. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Sabo, I got to know him relatively well. As a matter of fact, he did our T-shirts, set of T-shirts. Let me see if I can find one. Talk amongst yourselves for a second. That's Sabo, and I like him very much. He's a very quiet guy, very kind, just a good guy. The thing that I saw about when I first saw Sabo, and I thought, my God, the guy's a genius, is this piece of art that I'm going to look for right now, real quick. Yeah, this one. This is bloody marvelous. Come on now. You can do it. Okay. This is the thing I saw that Sabo did that I like so much. That's just genius. Um, and and the rest of the stuff he's done is really like this. He did one of Ted Cruz with his MMA fighter and tats and everything. But yeah, that's great. That's great stuff. And he was putting these things up around L.A. and it was what he was doing with this stuff, especially in since look, Sabo wouldn't be anything if Sabo was doing it in Texas. The fact that he was doing it in Santa Monica, and and when I first saw one of these, I was living on the other side of the hill, and I had to get on the freeway every day, and I saw one of these right on the ramp, and I knew that this was really pissing off just about everybody that went by. But for me, it was um, it was liberating. It was it was like social proof. It was like, no, you're not the only person out there who thinks this way, and it was really that kind of thing is really really important. Um, I don't know what's actually happened to him. I hope he's gone on to a successful career. Uh, but the problem is bigger than Santa Monica billboards. I saw Zoe's segment was on this guy who did my generation and your generation, talking about the Gen Zs, and he's this guy's born in '88, so he's you know was Zoe's segment on the virtue signal, and I said, man, I thought this was a guy I'd have to tell to get off my yard. Turns out this young guy is telling other people to get off my yard. And I thought that was really, really cool. We're going to find out, in a few weeks what the temperature is. Um, I've been roundly mocked and pilloried for this, but I don't care. I saw the numbers on the betting get worse and worse and worse, and then they started turning around significantly. And it's may not be an accurate predictor of what the vote is going to be, but it's certainly measuring something. And I haven't checked it in a while, so let's just see what the betting odds are saying about the country right now. Because it was shocking. All right. Enough of that number. That's not bad. Here, I'll get you your weekly updates here. Yeah, it was like collapsing, and now it's not. Hang on. Here we go. So here we go with people who are putting their money where their mouth is. Come on, you slow son of a bee. Is that you? Yes. All right, here's the latest. It's House control for 2022. And you can see that right around where the S was in September, these numbers were really colliding. Now, in the Senate, they actually crossed. Let's see what the Senate is doing. Oh, man. Look at that. Look at that. That's good news. You like this. Come on, baby. Check this out. So, you could see, if you look at June and July, just before the second J, we were just a huge, huge advantage over the Democrats. And then something happened, and that immediate drop, then a rebound, then another drop, to the point where we were then down to 32% or something chance of winning the Senate. Hi there, Rasset Bannon. Sorry. Even if the GOP wins back the House and the Senate, will it be just like the Obama years all over again? That's a good question. Let's explore that. This is really, really encouraging. And down 2.5% for the Dems in the last day. How much? Oh, that's because that's a screen grab and it won't behave the way. Hang on a second. Let me see. In the last week, 7% change in the last week. That's a big number. Democrats gone down 7%. Republicans have gone up 7% in the last week. So, what does all this mean? This is the thing I can't completely understand. I have a pretty good idea what caused the red to drop and the blue to rise around June or July. That was around the time of the Supreme Court decision on abortion and the Mar-a-Lago raid. But it looks like, I mean, I really think in another day or two it'll be more than 50-50. And frankly, none of this really matters. The only thing that matters is the vote. But still, when I saw those numbers invert, and when it got to the worst, you can see that point there right between the, right on the S or so. When the Dems were the highest and the Republicans were the lowest, I just thought, what happened? And I was not pleased at all about that. But it's looking a lot better now. So, will it be the same as with Obama? I don't know. Obviously the last time we had the House and the Senate, we also had the presidency, and we didn't do a damn thing. That was beyond belief. When Obama swept in 2008, he got everything done that he wanted to do in 2 years, and we didn't do a damn thing. And to be honest, I think that's because none of us really realized just how serious the problem was. That was the thing about the Trump administration, was they pulled out everything they had on the night of the 2016 election. Then they had pulled out everything they had during his term, and then they dropped the nuclear weapon that they've been keeping in their pocket on the 2020 election. And so now the question is, if we get the House and the Senate back, will we fight like it's the final, like, end days, or will we just go back to business as usual? I don't know. I've been pleased watching Ted Cruz and a couple of others grilling these people. Rand Paul, great example. And that is the hope, is that the country is much more, that the Republican Party is much more alarmed. Hawley is the man, yes, Josh Hawley. Be Fire put that up there, but that was the name I was looking for. I couldn't place. I got a bit of a crush on Josh Hawley, to be perfectly honest with you. Honestly, he's. I watch him dismantle these people, and I say to myself, this isn't really that difficult. It's just, you just have to be willing to do it. And I think, there's some people talking about Mitch McConnell. There was a lunch with Mitch McConnell back in 2009 or 10, I think. And so that's, 12 years ago. And I was sitting right next to him. And McConnell just couldn't get over the fact that he had spending cuts that totaled $10 billion over the course of 3 years. He just couldn't get over it. It was like he was so proud of it, he just kept coming back to it. And I thought to myself, we really are in for some real trouble here. King of Clean says he's very sick of Ted Cruz. Guy seems really, really, really like a big fat phony to me. I've known Ted Cruz really pretty well. He was the guy who got me my honorary Texas citizenship and and the and I don't think Ted is a phony. I think that Ted comes off as a phony, and I think that that's why he doesn't certainly didn't get more traction in the presidential race. There's something about his cadences and his face that don't sound sincere. But he is, if you look at his record, hard to improve on. He's he's but I mean it's something to do with his delivery. I don't think it's got to do with his character. I just think it's his delivery. I know that when I introduced him in a number of events, and I was sitting in the front row when he was doing the main speech, and I know when Ted was about to deliver a joke, it's like he had this wind up, and you could see this joke coming in from the next county, and it was so rhetorically artless that it sounded. I mean, if you can see a joke coming, and then you just checking your watch for the punchline, that's a rhetorical issue. But in terms of his record, and he's a real believer. He's a true believer. And who was it? Was it Scalia? I think Ted Cruz was a clerk for Scalia. Scalia said he's the most brilliant guy he'd ever seen, and so I think Ted's the real deal. Trey Gowdy's the real deal. Sears, this woman in Georgia, is the real deal. And by the way, if this gets back to Ted, this story, that's fine. I just want it to get back to him with a full understanding that he has nothing but my undying respect, admiration, and vote, as well as my affection. I really love the guy. He came across the airport in Fort Lauderdale, walked some significant distance just to say hi to me, and he didn't have to do that. And so I really, really like and admire him. I think he'd be a fine president. I think he's a fine senator. I think he'd be a fine Supreme Court justice. But we need more of them. And he's Donald Trump said some nasty things about him because Donald Trump said some nasty things about everybody. But I think that Ted Cruz has defended Donald Trump aggressively from the moment that primary ended, and I just think that says a lot. I remember thinking when his presidential campaign was running in the 2016 election, I remember thinking I would like to get hired so that I can go over there and teach Ted Cruz how to not act on camera. Because he's not lying. It's not fake. It looks fake, but it's not. It's just a sort of a stiffness and a formality, which, by the way, is not there when you get him, one-on-one. He's a completely fluid guy. But in any event, Ted is a great guy, and everything I see of DeSantis makes me like him better and better and better. Saw Biden there in Florida. I said, "Thank you, Gov." Okay. Boy, I'll tell you, there's one thing that this Hurricane Ian has shown us as the so-called President of the United States, and that is that I don't guess there's any doubt anymore about climate change. I think it's the only. I'm pretty sure that was the only hurricane of the season. Usually you get 12 or something like that. And I'm getting plenty tired of this particular desperate theme as well. All right, let's see. Getting back to the questions here. Um, okay, let's do GK Masterson. Hey, Bill, considering the fact that we seem to be staring down the barrel of World War III, this time things will glow. Are you planning to get out of one of the primary targets for nukes? I am not in the slightest bit worried about nuclear warfare or nuclear strike on Los Angeles. I'm not in the slightest bit worried about that. It doesn't even enter my radar. And the reason for that is pretty simple, really. We went through 70 years of Cold War, and the ideology on both sides was so much more polarized than it is now that that's if it was going to happen, that's when it's going to happen. In other words, if you're in a submarine during the Cuban Missile Crisis and you're in a Soviet submarine and you're getting depth charged by American destroyers, which is what actually happened, and you decide you're not going to launch that nuclear torpedo because the consequences are so overwhelming, or if you're in charge of a Soviet missile battery, and you see on your radar screens incoming American warheads, and you have orders to launch on warning, and you don't launch on warning in the height of the Cold War with this evidence of the first American strike coming in. If you don't launch then I don't see any way to launch a full-scale nuclear war. Now, just so everybody's clear, it doesn't mean that I don't think that there could be a tactical nuclear warhead. That's within the realm of possibility. But everybody throwing for the fences, I don't see any world at all where that happens. At all. I just don't think anybody would carry out the orders because they didn't carry out the orders when the ideology was at its full tilt boogie, right? If the Soviets wouldn't launch in 1962 or 1987, then I'm not so sure that the Russians would launch in 2022. It just doesn't scare me, and I think that's really it. Is that it's when he says, we're not bluffing about the nuclear option, and I said, okay, well, then we're holding cards too. No, I can't. I simply can't. I can see Putin getting desperate enough to do that in Ukraine. But even then, look, even the military analysts who are talking about it seriously are saying if he does do it, he's going to have to deliver it by aircraft, because he can't count on a missile battery. He can't count on getting all 7 of those guys together. I also have, I think, for the average layman, a really superb sense of the scale of these things. So I don't see Burbank or Van Nuys Airport as the top of the targeting list. It's one thing when you got 25,000 nuclear weapons, you got enough to bounce the rubble, but we're down to 6,000 now or something like that. And I'm genuinely, it's not on my radar. It's one of the very few things that I would actually like to be proven right about rather than proven wrong about. But I just simply don't. It's inconceivable to me, and I had been toying with the theory well prior to the Ukraine invasion that nuclear war may not have ever been possible. I know that that's a controversial thing to say, but I'm actually looking at the Cold War history as closely as I did, and hearing some of the behind-the-scene things that Reagan would say or Eisenhower would say, and It seems to me that the most likely case was the one that actually happened, and that was that these weapons are so awful, and that there is simply no win available. There is no win, and at the height of the Cold War, when we were bandying around megadeaths, well, if we strike first, we may only get 30 megadeaths, but if we don't, then we'll get 120 megadeaths, a million people killed. Dave Big Booty says supposedly Reagan and Gorbachev refused to launch in a simulation. Yeah. Now, I don't think Putin is. I certainly don't think Putin is insane. I know for a certain fact that he's got dictator disease. He's surrounded by yes men, and he's told what he wants to hear. And so when he finds out that he's called up 300,000 soldiers, and then he finds out half of them have fled the country, and then he finds out there's no uniforms for the other half. He's supposed to have 1 million uniforms in stock. Turns out they're not there. Turns out they're not there because somebody took the money for the uniforms, didn't deliver the uniforms. That kind of being totally misinformed is a genuine danger, but he's not insane. And so what possible motivation could there be for that? I mean, and even if you factor in the emotional stuff, look, if there were M1s on the, blowing holes in the wall of the Kremlin, then I might be, I'd readjust my calculations. But this is, no matter what Putin says, everybody knows that they're the ones who did the aggression, and so it doesn't enter my radar. It's absolutely out of the question, I think. My wife is concerned about Ukrainians attacking into Russia. I said, that's something else you don't have to worry about, honey, but, it doesn't seem to work. When you've got family there, it's... I've tried to swat that idea down as many times as I could, and I'm not going to try anymore. All right, let's see here. Marusha Dark, let me just have a look. Let's scroll down here. What do we got? One page. Okay, abortion and spite. While reading this article on Hamiltonian spite and game theory, it occurred to me that one reason why the left might be trying to actively push for abortion as a means... It occurred to me that one reason why the left might be trying to actively push for abortion is as a means of competition. Leftists are less likely to have children of their own for various reasons, and thus their ideas are less likely to reproduce through familial and genetic lines. Thus, they tend to resort to ideologically capturing and converting children of their right. They can't or won't have kids of their own, so they need to steal yours to survive at a lineage level. That's kind of an interesting idea. However, if that's not possible, then pushing the right to have more abortions would achieve a similar end by reducing the number of rightists, again, if we consider those cases of ideology passing through kin, and thus the number of competitors within the same ideological space. And here's a link to Hamiltonian spite, which, to be perfectly honest, we have never heard before. Let me read the first sentence. Okay. Huh. There's no question that when we're talking about the women that we saw on that episode that so did a couple of virtue signals ago, these two women sitting there on a radio or on a podcast talking about how much they wanted to have their abortions live streamed and digging deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper down the vile tunnel. there's no doubt in my mind that while those people were playing for the spotlight, there's no doubt in my mind that this is what they fully believe, and that if they could do it, they would do it. Those people are irredeemably evil people, those two individuals, and this entire ideology is irredeemably evil. It's not just wrong, and it's not just stupid, and it's not just invasive. It's evil by any rational definition of it. It's evil. And just to be clear about this, because this is something that's not going to get me any points on either side, but the thing about it for me that's evil is not so much the abortion as the celebration of the abortion. You can have an opinion that is predicated on the, hey, I have no religious beliefs or whatever, and my choice. You can have that opinion, but to celebrate this thing, to make it the price of admission into the club. Now you're really getting into Moloch territory. Now you really are. You really are very close now to just throwing babies into the fire, and this business of I don't know. The hatefulness of these people, and I've never seen any one of them smile. Talked earlier on the show tonight about how TikTok is essentially technology for people who don't know anything, to lecture people about morality that they know nothing about. And if I see one more person leaning into the camera, with the vertical frame, going, "Let's talk about fat phobia. Or let's talk about white privilege." It's like, well, you go ahead and talk about it all you want to. I don't really give a damn what you have to say about anything. You sit there like, Confucius or Aristotle, like you're laying down the law and the truth. You can't name 3 countries other than you don't know where. You can't multiply 3 times 3 times 3. You're not the kind of person I feel like I need to listen to, But they're so hate-filled. They're so. I'm talking about the political TikToks, right? Some of them are very fun. Some of them are really, really fun. But this seems to be, and it's like, what do you expect? What else can this Generation Z do? They haven't ever had to compete at anything. In fact, they've been bashed over the head for competing, and all they don't know math, they don't know history, they don't know science, they don't know any of this stuff because they haven't been taught any of this stuff. The only thing they've ever been taught is about injustice, and the only skill they have is protesting. And there is going to come a point, when there is going to come a point when they are going to be when they will be orphans. Right? There will come a point. This is just a logical certainty when Gen Z will be. There will be nobody to take care of Gen Z above Gen Z, and I don't suspect the people downstream of Gen Z are going to be in a big hurry to take care of them, given how charming so many of them are. But that's when the real reality will hit. I don't believe that they're on the verge of AI, but I do believe that they are able to make very high level statistical predictions, which is, if you want to call that intelligence, it's not what I would call intelligence, certainly not what I would call self-awareness, but without question, you throw enough computing problem at enough data, you can make some fairly accurate predictions, especially if you're constantly refining the algorithms. And it seems to me that the people who are making the decisions about which attorney generals or which state or city attorneys get elected, the people that are putting money into teachers' unions and what's being taught and all the rest of it, all of the left basically. If you look at the product, if you think of modern progressive politics as an ideology that produces a kind of a person, then the product that they're putting out is somebody who is narcissistic, extraordinarily uneducated, absolutely certain that they're right, mean-spirited, insecure, and emotionally crippled. And those are what they're turning out in large numbers. And those are exactly the qualities you would want to be in the generation that would be the cleanup generation. Not the perpetual generation, the cleanup generation. So I'm working on the Soviet secret police, and so you've got to have secret policemen that will go after traitors, let's say, and people who've been accused of espionage and kill those people. Okay? Now we want to go after the old Bolsheviks, the people who were part of this revolution. Well, these secret policemen won't go after the old Bolsheviks because they grew up with the old Bolsheviks and they know that they buddied around with Lenin, and so they have like some trepidation. So now you have to get younger people who have no respect or know who these old Bolsheviks are. They'll come in and they'll kill the old secret policemen. Then you can have those people kill everybody in the party, and then you have to have another generation of secret police that come up and kill the murderers, and so on and so on and so on. And this Gen Z seems to be bred for hate and anger and absolute lack of humility or humor. And so if I wanted to create a generation to essentially destroy institutions, this is what I'd be building. It would look exactly like this. And I find that hard to believe that that is a coincidence. So the question is how deep is it? The good news is that if you want to treat people like herd animals, and you want them to be submissive, and you want them to not be the kind of people that will come after you with guns if you try to take all their food away, if that's the kind of person you're breeding, Eloy, basically, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. They're like Eloy with attitude. That's what we're creating now. Is we're creating Eloy with attitude. They're soft. They're useless in terms of skill sets. They have no independence. They're dependent on the Morlocks for food. And they're exceptionally good looking. I don't think anybody could take that away from them. And they're Eloy. But unlike the Eloy, who were just grazers, they're just rabbits or sheep. These are mean-spirited people. But fortunately, they're mean-spirited people who are extraordinarily fragile. And that helps, because the people to be afraid of are the mean-spirited, angry people who have no feelings, not the people who have too many feelings. I don't fear that generation at all. I certainly fear the damage that they can do institutionally, but in terms of my personal safety, doesn't really do it for me. They're not street fighters. The Antifa subset of that particular fungus thinks they're street fighters, and they dress like street fighters, and they act like street fighters as long as nobody's actually fighting. But when it comes to that, they run and cry. So I'm not worried about them like that, the way I'd be worried about the Cheka or the Gestapo or the SS or something like that. And that's a comforting thought, right? I'm not saying they won't pull triggers. I'm just saying they won't pull their own triggers. These are not the people you send out. I just had a funny thought. You just imagine these kids from Oberlin being sent to Texas to take away ranchers' guns with guns. We're going to give you Oberlin art students, you studies students. Here's a couple of weapons. Go out there and take those guns away from those conservatives. We wouldn't even have to reload, right? I mean, so they're like, it's like that generation is custom designed for the information age. They're designed. They're social media warriors because that's where the fight is. And I say social media, I mean in a larger sense of the pop culture and all that other stuff. They're perfect for that because they're spoilers, right? They're when I say they're spoilers, they're people who have so much anger and so much outrage built into them by their teachers that they're perfect for them. These are the kind of people that go to look at Jeremy's Razors, a perfect example, right? So Harry's Razors pulls its advertising from Daily Wire because somebody with 2 Twitter followers started bitching and moaning to Harry's Razors. This is perfect. This is what they're good at. 1 or 2 of them can get together, make enough noise. That's it, basically. That's what they do. They find a target, and then they'll make a lot of noise. Okay. And because the corporate shells are so soulless, they'll back down. Everybody's backed down in front of this generation. Everybody's backed down. Now, Bag of Sprite says you don't need art students to do that. The police would be more than happy to do it, regardless of whether it's red or blue state. I don't disagree with you on that, Bag of Sprite, because I have seen the police in this country do things I never thought I'd see the police do. But with that said, I also I don't find the fascists that are in the police force currently, you better listen to us, we're going to lock you all up, do what I say, those kind of things. I don't find those people to be particularly brave either. So we'll see. Look, and we talk. It's so easy to talk about a generation like everybody that age is that way. It doesn't mean that at all. I'd be willing to bet you that the taken as a percentage, most of Gen Z is perfectly fine. It's just an extraordinarily loud and particularly annoying and vocal subset of Gen Z. I don't know how much of Gen Z is affected or infected with that ideology, but I do know that they don't strike me as the kind of people that I desperately must have on my side if things start to go south. Now let's see here. That's an interesting question. Henry Lumley, hey Bill. So we've all have discussed the Democrat bad policies ad nauseum. Other than cowardice, what are the worst Republican policies? I mean, I've definitely got something in mind. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to kind of triangulate around it. I think currently the worst conservative or Republican traits that I see now are overreaction. Race Bannon, not only are you Gen Z in here, hopefully you count for something, but the very fact that you've chosen as a name Race Bannon gives me hope for the future. And I pretty much mean that. Overreaction. I understand it because I understand this dynamic because I am prone to it. Like virtually everybody else who's been under attack for their adult lives. When you've been defamed and slandered and not only that, but called a murderer by the murderers, called a traitor by the traitors, that kind of thing. That builds up a perfectly understandable, in fact, essentially an unavoidable fight reflex, and it's fight or flee, and we don't want to flee, so we'll fight. And it can drive people into unreasonable positions. If it turns out that it's raining and a liberal says it's raining, that doesn't mean that it's not raining. And there is a lot of that now that I see where the poking has been so intense now that any time we get poked about anything, we will automatically fight back against something, even though what the thing we're fighting back against may in fact be true. I mean, I don't know whether they did it by accident or whether the clock, the stop clock right twice a day or whatever. But just because progressives are in favor of something doesn't mean it's automatically wrong. It means it's almost always wrong, but it's not always wrong. And I have seen a lot of that. And the thing about the left that I despise the most is their uniformity of thought and their inability, let alone unwillingness, to handle differing ideas with civility. And I'm seeing a lot of that now among conservatives because you can only poke somebody in the eye long enough before somebody just starts flailing around and won't get poked in the eye anymore. It's something to be aware of and something to be careful of. I think that people say, well, we don't want to become them in order to fight them. Yes, I agree with that, but we again, this is not. It may sound contradictory, but it isn't. I don't think you can play fair with the left because they don't play fair. At the same time, I don't want to become them, and I don't want to become like them, and I don't think it's necessary. I know that the Marines met the Japanese in the Pacific, found out what kind of an opponent they were, tailored their response to that, fought a horrifically vicious, no quarter war, and when the war was over, those same Marines didn't go home like samurai. They went home like the farmers that they were when they started. And the same is true of the Civil War and all the rest of this stuff. You are sometimes forced to fight dirty against people who fight dirty. You shouldn't start by fighting dirty. But if somebody's fighting dirty and you aren't, you're going to lose. Then either change your strategy or all the good people go away. So if somebody's fighting dirty, then you fight dirty back. But when they stop, you stop, and don't. If you hold on to that and you keep that attitude, like now the only way to get through life is to fight dirty all the time, then you've actually lost. And it's not easy, It's not easy. There is an emotional, as much as nobody can deny that emotions are such a big part of everything. The thing that I find the reason we're so ineffective is because we are absolutely unwilling to deal with emotions. For the same reason, this is the exact same dynamic. The left uses emotions by cheating. They cheat. They lie in order to get an emotional reaction out of people. We see that emotional reaction predicated on the lie, and we say the problem is the emotional reaction. Actually, the problem is the lie. Running to save a friend who's had a leg blown off in combat, that's an emotional reaction too. It doesn't mean it's bad because it's an emotional reaction. It means is is the reaction. Is it true? Is it real? Is it true? And and I think I could probably sum all this up to say our daily oiling of the armor and sharpening of the swords and all of that stuff that we have to do on a daily basis. We should be doing that not in defense of conservatism or Republicans. We should be doing it in defense of the truth. And and if you make that your lodestone, if the truth is your northern star, then you won't go wrong. But if it turns out that you've been, if it turns out that progressives have been touching the truth inappropriately for as long as they have been, and you begin to think that the enemy is the progressives when it's not, it's the lie, then you can start to have this kind of reaction that I talked about where, liberals, it's raining, liberals say it's raining, and you say, hell it is. That's not good for anybody. Nuclear secrecy, nuke map, yeah. I've seen these nuclear explosion things, and by the way, everybody's got to go somehow, and frankly, if it turns out I'm wrong about that, then I'm wrong about that. But that'd snap us out of it. That would snap us out of it. Eric Blake says, see Alec Jones, very emotional, constantly makes things worse for himself and our side. Yeah, it's a great example. The thing about it, Alex Jones, is that Alex Jones is right. He's correct. And not only is he correct, he's correct 5 or 10 years ahead of everybody else being correct, probably 1 out of 6 times. But the times that he's incorrect are so loud and so destructive that he's a net deficit. Quibo says the biggest nuke in the world wouldn't cause a lot of damage. That's quite true relative to the world, but if you were standing underneath it, it would hurt quite a bit. Actually, it wouldn't hurt at all. We talked about this not too long ago with the Chicxulub impact. I think it was 100 trillion tons of TNT, 20 trillion Tsar bombas, 20,000 billion Tsar bombas. So no, you cannot destroy life on Earth with nuclear weapons. You could launch every nuclear weapon you got, and it's not going to destroy life on Earth. But at the same time, it could certainly ruin your weekend. Dave Olson. My God, I thought we were further along than I thought we were further along. Hi, Bill. Hope all is well with you and Natasha and your extended family abroad. Thank you. So the Senate launch system is rolled out again, and they're scheduling its maiden launch for a week from tomorrow, although in fairness, it's wise to move it back to the VAB when Hurricane Ian rolled right over the launch site. In that time, SpaceX is slated to launch 5 missions, including one tonight at 8:25 p.m. Now, again, this was, I think, scheduled for the 6th. Oh, this is dated October 13th, so I guess there's one tonight, 8:25 p.m. Pacific time. That'd be pretty soon. And there's a Falcon Heavy later this month, and there's a 6th launch scheduled for 2 days after the SLS's launch attempt. Chuckle, chuckle. Any rational person would look up at this and say we should scrap SLS and let Elon take a shot, but we haven't been rational nation for a long time. I'm just glad Artemis 1 is uncrewed, so I can root for it to go kablooey with a clean conscience. Thoughts? Yeah. I want Artemis to go kablooey. And I want it to go kablooey for the same reason what we talked about an hour ago. And that is the sunk cost fallacy. If you want this thing to succeed because of all of the money that we've spent on it, then its success will mean that we'll continue to pour money down this hole and have $4 billion per launch. you can launch an awful lot of SpaceX for $4 billion. And in fact, there's something you can do much, much, much more important than that. So, yeah, I want it to go kablooey. I want it to go kablooey and have that be the end of it. And people say, well, we've spent, what, 20, 30, $40 billion on this thing now? Yes. Let's have it explode before we spend $100 billion on it. And, by the way, I have no doubt whatsoever that the year that NASA and the FAA combined and the EPA have prevented Elon Musk from flying the Starship, the year of red tape he's had to deal with is there specifically to let SLS get off the pad. It is a standing army of obsolete equipment. And actually, I was thinking about SLS earlier today. You think about this for a minute. The entire argument for SLS was off the shelf, right? We don't have to do anything new. Since we don't have to do anything new, since we already know how to do all the things that SLS will consist of, then it should be a piece of cake. We're going to use space shuttle engines. We've been using those on the shuttles for 25, 30 years. We're going to use external tanks, SRBs. This is all 1970s technology. We've been flying this stuff for 30 years now. So SLS ought to be cheap, inexpensive, and fly that baby right off the pad. So what does it tell you that NASA cannot make a system that they've been running the parts of for 30 years work? What does that say about what NASA is today? It tells me that NASA and Boeing I think it's just plain fraud to use those names. You know, I mean, NASA's brand for me was destroyed after I found out what caused the Columbia disaster. I gave them Challenger, you know, but when I saw that it had happened again for the exact same thing happened, you know, twice, not the same failure, but the same willful turning a blind eye willfully towards problems, and, you know, changing the orbit of the space station so that the Russians can get to it, and therefore meaning the space station is now useless for going out towards the ecliptic and the planets stuff. All of this stuff. It's a standing army. It's a government program. It's a waste of time and money, and we've wasted a lot of money on it already. I'd like it to blow up. And it deserves to. It deserves to blow up. And you know what's funny about all this? The reason why it's so badly built, the reason why it's so expensive, and the reason why they can't get it to work is because nothing on it is new. That's why. Because there was at no point ever in the design of this system when people had to say, what could we do that would be creative and different here? How could we solve this problem without just throwing money at it? Oh, what problems are there to solve? You've got SRBs. We've had those since 1980. Flying since 1980. Shuttle main engine's been flying since 1980. That orange foam on the outside of the tank, the booster, that's been flying since 1980. I just this second realized. I can't believe I didn't realize this until now. In fact, I'm really quite shocked that it did not really fully occur to me until just this second. But this is not there is no second or third stage on this thing. It's a one-stage rocket. It's a single stage to orbit rocket, not counting the SRBs, right? That's a one-piece rocket, I think. I may be wrong, but I don't seem to remember any kind of a seam there. So okay, so you can't even do the staging anymore. All right, so the reason they can't even get the old off-the-shelf hardware to work is because it's old off-the-shelf hardware. Nobody cares. Anybody who's got any kind of creativity or drive is not going to be working on this stuff. Quiba wants to know, why can't we use the space shuttle? The space shuttle I think the space shuttle was a real catastrophe. And you know, like I said, I was thinking about this earlier. Look, I've seen several shuttle launches, and watching the shuttle go is impressive. But, and this is simple thing. But when you look at the space shuttle on the pad, and even when you see it launch, it doesn't look like it should be flying. It doesn't look right. And that's because it's not right. That's not what the space shuttle was supposed to be. Space shuttle was supposed to sit on top of a big honking jet engine and fly it up to 30,000 feet, then shut off the jets, fire up some boosters, get the thing going, give it a good high alpha, and then it goes off of the back of this thing. The booster just flies back down and lands. They refuel it and so on. And when you look at the space shuttle as it eventually flew, you look at this thing, you said, this doesn't look right. There's something really wrong with this design. And what's wrong with the design is budget cut, budget cut, budget cut, budget cut right in the middle of the program. And now you don't have money to do this either. Oh, really? Nope. So what are you going to do now? It's the space shuttle looks as bizarre as it does because it is in fact constructed out of Band-Aids. It's what it is. It's a Band-Aid system. And the bankruptcy of the shuttle became clear pretty soon after they started running the shuttles. Look, the shuttle was supposed to make getting into space cheap and inexpensive. And when I saw that Elon Musk was trying to recover his boosters, I went through a period of years thinking, I don't like the idea of rockets. I want something with wings on it. I want something that looks futuristic. And then I realized, no. This is the smartest, cleanest, quickest way to go, is put things in a cylinder, minimize the frontal plate area, minimize the total drag area, and send it up and bring it back again. The shuttle was the most complex machine ever built, and you don't want that. You ideally, in a perfect world, you'd like to be saying this is the simplest machine ever built. So the shuttle to me was, I remember all of it. I remember the drawings that came out about the shuttle in the years after Apollo. I remember them during Apollo-Soyuz. I remember them during Space Lab. The shuttle's coming. I remember going to the Cape when the shuttle was getting ready to go. And I remember seeing all these launches, and there is a certain, I almost said majesty, but I don't think majesty is the word. There's a certain impressiveness about watching an airplane go up straight like that. But it doesn't look like it should be flying. And usually that's a pretty good determinant, not always. I mean, Burt Rutan's stuff is strange looking, but it all looks like it should be flying. Anyway, so why would this STS succeed? Who's going to work on the STS, right? Let's say you're people usually do their best work in their 20s and their 30s. So you're a young engineer or aerospace expert or aerodynamicist or something like that, and they say to you, okay, we're ready to go. We're ready to hire some new people for this shuttle launch system, space launch system. And you get to say, okay, what am I going to get my hands on? Well, you're going to get your hands on rocket engines that were designed in the 70s, and you're going to get your hands on other technology that was designed in the 70s. And you're going to go ahead and put those pieces together to make something that wasn't nearly as interesting as what they were originally designed for. Have fun. It's garbage. And what you find is that, and here's what's interesting, the Space Launch System, which is every single bit of hidebound tradition, right? Just designed by bureaucracy, SLS, and it doesn't work. And at the same time, you have Jeff Bezos, who is doing exactly the opposite. He's going exactly down Elon Musk's path. Hey man, we're going to build our own new engines, and we're going to recover the rocket, and we're going to do all that. And he's failed too. So that tells me that there's something pretty special about this Elon Musk fella, because Bezos has had the money and a big head start on SpaceX, and it's not like SpaceX is doing something new and NASA's doing something old. That's true, but SpaceX is doing something new, and Blue Origin's doing something new, and Blue Origin is just, it's pathetic. They were supposed to be making the rocket engines, I think, for SLS or for something, and then it's garbage. And the Virgin Galactic, has that flown since Branson's flight? I don't know if it has. I know that Branson pushed the flight. We've talked about this before. I'm not going to get it again. Really pushed that flight when he found out that Bezos was going to fly. Then he had to fly first. So it's a miracle those people survived. But they're failures. And they're failures because they're not taking it seriously. Branson went up to low Earth orbit. He went a suborbital flight. He didn't go to low Earth orbit. You can make a very compelling case that he didn't get into space either because he didn't cross the Kármán line. He just got 50 miles up and they redefined what space is. It's typical of what happens in our age now. This is what losers do. You're offering space rides and it turns out that your vehicle is too heavy and you don't have the engine to get across the internationally recognized boundary of space, 100-kilometer Kármán line, right? So they go ahead and they fly to space, and then what happens? They don't get to 100 kilometers. So they say, well, we got past 50 miles, and 50 miles has always been the definition. No, it hasn't. And I remember watching that flight and hearing the ground controller, mission controller woman saying, and they're returning from their flight to space, which, as everybody knows, is 50 miles high above. It's like, stop, just stop it. Just stop it. Just don't do it. I thought that the Mechazilla and the chopsticks and all that stuff designed to catch rockets, that launch tower, I thought that was 5 or 10 years out. It's just sitting there waiting for the paperwork to be signed. It's waiting for the ink to dry. That's holding up all that red tape. And the thing of it is, when he finally does get a chance to launch that, the Starship with the big booster, there's a pretty decent chance that thing will blow up. And this is why I am feeling Elon's pain, is that he's been forced by government red tape to stop his tremendously, unbelievably, mind-bogglingly successful process of blowing up his own rockets. This is how you make progress. This is how you do it. We don't know what we don't know. And the only way to know is to go out and find it. What caused this? We didn't plan that this rocket would explode at, 30 seconds into the flight. Nobody had planned that, did they? Nope. What happened? Well, we don't know. But we know that it was none of the things that had caused them to explode before because we fixed those things. So you get the data back and then you find out, okay, it was this. Well, doggone it. Would have been nice if we could have seen that in advance, but nevertheless, there it is. So let's go in there and let's fix that. And now we're not going to have that problem again. We'll have a new problem, but we won't have that problem. And that's how it works. There's a classic book out there called Fate is the Hunter. And it's about the very early days of commercial aviation, with right after World War II, with propeller-driven four-prop airliners. They're having, hey, Stephen Coco, first-time chat, hooray! Oh my gosh, we've been, have we been bombed? I think we are under attack. Hi everybody, we're talking about, hey, look at that number. We're talking about the Space Launch System and how awful it is and how awesome Elon Musk is and why. Musk succeeds because it's his company, right? It's his money, it's his company. And he says, we're going to fly this thing, and well, we can't guarantee it's not going to blow up. No, that's right. But we're going to fly it so it blows up, not going to intentionally blow it up. Here's the rule, okay? This is Elon Musk's rule, whether you realize it or not. I don't care how many times these rockets explode. I just don't want them to ever explode for the same reason twice. That's the magic formula. That's it. If you got that, you're all the way free. Blow up as many times as it has to. Anticipate all the failures we can. Build our way around these failures. And if something explodes, okay, but we can never have it explode for the same reason twice, because if we did, we wasted an explosion. We had to have something explode, so we didn't know what we didn't know. And now we do. So let's not do that anymore. Turns out it explodes because this thing vibrates. Well, then stop letting that thing vibrate. Yes, sir. Done. Off we go. And there does come a point when you turn a corner, it's like the uncanny valley in graphics. You come out of the bucket where now he's having fewer and fewer failures because, frankly, he's gotten most of the bugs worked out of it. And I was just mentioning Fate is the Hunter. This book about the early days of commercial airliners in propeller airplanes, and they were having a crash a week, and sometimes two. They would lose 60 people on a 4-engine propeller airplane flies into a mountain. Well, why'd you fly into a mountain? Well, because our navigation system wasn't any good. Well, get a better navigation system. Okay. Well, it turns out we don't hit that mountain again. We know something else. And now we've gone 21 years without an air crash in this country on a major carrier. There are entire generations of people out there who have never, ever seen an airliner crash. And when I was growing up, and I mean growing up like when I was 30, 40 years old, somewhere in there, they were still one or two pretty good ones a year. And then suddenly, done. And we haven't had one since 2001. And that record will eventually that will be broken, but that doesn't defeat the fact that we have the reason planes don't crash anymore is because we've crashed enough of them to know what makes airplanes crash. And that's it. And hey, the Big House says he's got it right. The black box is paid off. Yes, the black box is paid off. The black boxes, and the only government agency that I still have a complete degree of confidence in, and that is the National Transportation Safety Board. Those guys go after the truth, and they don't give a damn who ends up in the spotlight. If it turned out that Boeing put a bolt on wrong and that's what caused the crash, then that's what the report will say. Now, having watched everything else in the government get completely corrupted, I have no question that it's just a matter of time for the NTSB. But as things stand right now, it is still driven. And the reason I think the NTSB is still essentially uncorrupted is because it's so small. It's a tiny agency. There's not a whole lot of cause for it because there's not so many plane crashes anymore because the NTSC. So as a 1,000-hour pilot, I can tell you that aviation regulations are written in blood, and so that's why Musk is successful, is because he understands. I covered this when I talked about the crash of the Virgin Galactic vehicle. Death in the Mojave, I think it was called. It was a firewall. And basically what I said was, look, there is essentially a fixed price to pay in order to do this. Most of it is money, a lot of it is time, but some of it is lives. It's a fixed price. We don't know what the price is, but we do know that you cannot get around paying it. We can't negotiate our way up and down out of it. There is a fixed price necessary to master this technology. And that fixed price is a certain number of explosions and a certain number of lives. And that's the way it is. And if you don't want to play the game, nobody's forcing you. But for God's sakes, get out of the way of the men who want to play the game because they understand the risks and they're ready to move the ball. Okay? So let's go find out where. Let's have test pilots, courageous men, and some women now. Let's have them go out there and find out where the deadly stuff is. Let's push the envelope. Nobody knows what that term means, by the way. I bet you one person in 100 knows what pushing the envelope really means. They just know that pilots say it because it sounds cool. But basically, the flight envelope is a chart of your airspeed and your altitude. How high can you fly? How fast can you fly? It's just a chart of the basic parameters of the aircraft. And pushing the envelope means, okay, so according to the flight envelope, at this altitude, my maximum airspeed is this, and if I go any faster, then I'm putting the plane in danger. I'm out of the safety margin now. All right, so let's push the envelope. Every aircraft has this. There's a VNE, it's a velocity never to exceed. It's the red line on your airspeed indicator. You've got You've got kind of a blank line or a white shaded area for the first 40, 50, 60 knots. Plane's not flying there. And then it's green, and then it goes yellow, which means in turbulence you need to back off. And then there's the VNE, the red line. And I have exceeded the VNE in an aircraft once by accident, just didn't catch it. And the plane did not disintegrate the second that line went past the red line. The second the airspeed indicator went past the red line, plane didn't come apart. And the reason it didn't come apart was because the people who designed the airplane know that whatever the airspeed is that will cause the plane to come apart, that's not where we're going to put the red line. We're going to put the red line 20% behind that or whatever number, right? So when I say there's a certain price to be paid, people have to go out there and they have to go past what's safe in order to find out where do things start to break. Where do they start to break? And you like to think, and to be perfectly honest, at least nowadays anyway, most of the time you get to come back from that, but not always. And in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s at Edwards Air Force Base, if you were married to a test pilot, Air Force test pilot at Edwards Air Force Base, your husband had a 25% chance of not coming home from every single experimental flight that he took. That's how fast things were moving then. That's how fast things were moving. And not only was there not somebody with a gun forcing those guys to get into the cockpit, there were guys with guns trying to keep them from getting into the cockpit. These are men, and they know what they're doing. They're fully aware what the risk is, and they have enough imagination and haven't seen enough accidents in their own eyes to know what the consequences are. They are fully aware of what they're doing. They're adults. They're volunteers. Get out of their way, right? Get out of their way. They are the ones who are going to solve these problems, whether it costs them their lives or not, so the rest of us can have a nice ride and not have to worry about it. There you go. Mike Sullivan mentions Chuck Yeager. Yeah. My all-time hero is Neil Armstrong, who I thought was not only the most amazing aviator ever, but a man of astonishing moral character. Neil Armstrong was an Eagle Scout, and he wrote a personal letter to every Eagle Scout that ever became an Eagle Scout after he came back from the moon. It's one little thing. He wouldn't sell his autograph. He wouldn't give his autograph to people. Forget selling. He wouldn't autograph anything because people were faking his autograph and stealing money online. So he was a great man. Chuck Yeager was a great man too, but he wasn't a good man. Chuck Yeager is a complete, absolute horse's ass. He's one of the worst people ever, and I've not heard anybody contradict that. Buzz doesn't have a super great reputation in that regard either. But that doesn't matter. I'm not. Chuck Yeager is not here to inspire me to moral behavior. Chuck Yeager is here to show me what can be done when you've got skill and nerve and guts and especially cool, not like Fonzie cool, like Lord Bio says he sent me a letter when he got his Eagle. You have a letter from Neil Armstrong, Lord Bios? That makes you a very lucky man. Yeah, so that's how things work. Let's see, we got a Jacob Belchak, we got a Cody Fett, I got another Marusha Dark. We're going to do the 2, and we're not going to do the 3. Done 2 already, sorry. No, that's just a notice anyway. All right, so here we go. Last 2. Jacob Belchak. Hi, Bill. Hi, Jacob Belchak. How are you? What do you recommend for leftist deconversion? There's more to follow, but my first knee-jerk reaction would be reality would be my first choice. The more that I observe, the more that I'm convinced that we're experiencing a separation of biblical proportions as the gap between right and left grows larger, such that we appear to be operating not just from separate perspectives, but separate realities. That's an interesting choice of words that I'll come back to. I'm not talking about anything on a cultural-wide level, but on an individual one. How do you pull someone who is based in lunacy out of their destructive thought spiral? Or is it like addiction where it doesn't let go until you hit rock bottom. What does political and philosophical rehab look like? Wow, that's a super great question there, Jacob. You said that we're coming from different realities, and that's fair. But my argument would be, and I know you feel this way yourself, and this is you're asking about how do you solve this problem. Here's one of the first things you have to confront. There aren't separate realities. There absolutely are separate interpretations of reality. There are separate opinions that are derived. There are separate stories, opposing stories, but they're not separate realities. You don't, there's that. You're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Reality is there, and reality exists. Now, it is one of the founding. In fact, I would say it is the central philosophy of modern progressivism to deny to deny the existence of reality. They have devolved to the place now where it is 100% wishful thinking. Magical thinking, and that is the belief that if we all say something is true, then it becomes true by magic, and they can't get out of it. There's no way for them to back up now. They have to keep going, because to stop is to not have anything to complain about. They have to keep going, and so now we hear about we're talking earlier about fat phobia and all this other stuff. And okay, this is the new outrage. And then when that outrage has been dealt with, then there will become another new outrage. And the level of outrage will get higher and higher and higher. And the thing that they're actually getting outraged about will get smaller and smaller and smaller. And eventually you will run out of how loud you can shout versus how small is the thing that you're shouting about. That's their philosophy. That's where their philosophy leads. There is no escape for that. When you have a philosophy based on victimhood, then the only way to prove your value in a society like that is to be top victim. And if it turns out that you don't have the right skin color or genitalia or whatever the case may be to be top victim, then the best that you can hope for is to be the top victim within the confines of your privilege structure, which is why you will see liberals doing things like hiring black people to come in and lecture them on their white privilege. They know that they're always going to be stuck at some lower level of victimhood because they're white. But by having black people come and lecture them on how much white privilege they have, and by flagellating themselves over it, that is as high as they can get on the victimhood level for rich white people. Okay. We are at the point now where testifying in front of Congress, grown adults cannot define what a woman is, and will testify under oath that men can become pregnant. And men can't become pregnant. And I don't mean men can't become pregnant because of the biology of it. I mean men can't become pregnant because of the etymology of it. The definition of a man precludes that individual's pregnancy. That's what defines a man. It's one of the definitions of a man. As a man and a woman, one of them can become pregnant, and the man ain't the one. And so to say that can happen means that you are no longer even talking about this magical thinking. Now you're talking about the willful destruction of reality. The willful destruction of reality. And fortunately for us, reality will not be destroyed. Reality is going to win this one. I remember when I was flying, people would say, Bill, every single time that it's been a contest between an airplane and a mountain, the mountain has won 100% of the time. 100% of the time, the mountain wins. I thought, yeah, I've heard that, and that's where they are. They're trying to will themselves into winning a plane crash, where the plane crashes in the mountain and the plane wins. Never going to happen. Doesn't happen. Now, as this lunacy continues, and the amount of mental contortion that you have to do in order to stay consistent, as that gets more and more and more exhausting, then you start losing people on a bell curve, right? The people who were never too attached to this ideology start hearing you saying this kind of nut stuff and they jump off. And then as it gets dumber and dumber and dumber and more invasive and more ridiculous, then more and more people fall off. And then you get to the other side of the bell curve and you find there are people that are never going to fall off of this philosophy, ever. Which is why outside that door, to this day, 3 out of 4 people are still wearing their little COVID face diapers because they have sunk cost syndrome going on here. They have been told that the good people wear the masks, that the Republicans and the idiots are the ones who don't wear the masks. They've been told that vaccination is the only answer. They've been told that things like hydroxychloroquine are for fools and idiots and orange people. And so their entire identity, not just their political views, their identity, who they are, is they are one of the smart, good people. And smart, good people wore a mask during the pandemic, and the smartest and the best people still wear it because it's anticipatory compliance for them. It's the true story of why in the camps, when they would put a new humiliation on the Jews, there was a subset of that population that was first in line to get the humiliation. There were people lined up to put the armband on. And they were lined up to put the armband on because it was a survival strategy for them. They didn't even realize it. But, basically what they're saying is, yeah, of course I'll wear the armband. Yes, Herr Oberleutnant, I'll wear the armband. You know why? Because I'm one of the good ones. That's why. Because I'm one of the good Jews. I'm not one of the ones you have to kill. You tell me to do this, I'll do it. You tell me to go out there and work out that, great. You tell me to stay in stay in my apartment during daytime, only go shopping at midnight. I'm down. I'm one of the good ones. You don't have to worry about me. That's what it is. It's this sunk cost. They cannot get out of it. But reality will not be denied, and comes a point when, look, I've had a really tough couple of months and a particularly tough couple of days. And I'm tired of bitching about that, and you're tired of hearing about it. But the reason I bring it up is because the only thing that really motivates change that you don't want to make is pain. And if there's something you really don't want to change, then it takes a lot of pain. And that's the way it is. It'd be nice if it weren't true, but that's the way it is. And that's why you had the wisdom to add on that at the end. Or is it like addiction where it doesn't let you go until you hit rock bottom? That's it. And that's what we're going to find out in 3 or 4 weeks. We're going to find out whether or not the nation has hit bottom yet. Certainly not everybody will have. Will enough people have hit bottom to change the situation, or do the beatings have to continue? Because that is an entire possibility as well. So if it turns out, people keep voting Democrat and they keep living in cities where the murder rate continues to spiral, then that means, yes, that you're right. That means that the rich liberals who live in New York City who vote for these left-wing progressives and talk about banning the police, it means that it will take until they are mugged or until their closest, dearest people in the world are murdered to change their mind. And for some of them, it won't change their mind even if they are murdered. One of the most common thing, I think, the most common thing said by people that were lined up to be shot in the Soviet prison system, the most common single sentence come out of their mouth was, "Long live Stalin." Right? You're going to shoot me. I'm innocent. I'm going to go ahead and say, "Long live Stalin." It's my way of saying I didn't do it. What do you say about that? Nothing. You can't. Those people are going down. They're just going with, as I've tried to say sometimes to people, when it comes time to help people who either, when it comes time to try and help people who haven't hit bottom yet, there's a lot of people want to get better, but not everybody has to get better. Not everybody's been to the bottom of the bottom where they no longer have any choice. They'll do anything to get away from that pain. And when you try to save people who haven't hit bottom yet, then the only analogy I could ever come up with is I say, look, I've got an anvil here on this boat, okay? And I'm going to throw this anvil overboard. Now, you can try and rescue that anvil, but it's going to the bottom, and it's either going with you or without you. It doesn't matter how hard you swim. It doesn't matter how much effort you put into it. The only two options now are that thing sinks on its own, or it sinks and takes you with it, and that's the reality of the situation. And that's sometimes effective, sometimes that's effective. What do? I've got to do something to help this person. You've done everything you can, right? Yeah. They keep doing it, right? Yeah. And they don't seem to be willing to change. Nope. Then the anvil is on its way to the bottom, and you have no longer got any authority here. You've got no longer got any of influence here. You've done everything you can. And now the only thing you can do, if the idea of watching that person sink is so intolerable to you, then the only choice left is to sink with them. And that doesn't do anybody any good. So in terms of deconversion, look, it's pain. And I'm hoping it's not a lot of pain. One thing I did learn from my time in Narcotics Anonymous, and I have to say this because I cannot mention it, otherwise I was the only person in Narcotics Anonymous who didn't have a narcotics problem. I was an addict, and I had the exact same psychological problems as those people. I just had a good enough imagination so that I never had to do the drugs. But Narcotics Anonymous was exactly where I belonged, even though I didn't have any problem with narcotics and I haven't done narcotics. With that said now, one thing you learn about that when you're in a room full of 35 or 40 other people who are on the verge of bursting into tears, you quickly determine what's real. You develop a strong sense of empathy for people who have the same level of pain that you do, and you can tell that without too much trouble. And what you find is that when you look at this group, obviously no two meetings were the same, but you had the same geographical cluster. You saw the same folks more or less at the same time. New people would come in, old people would fade out, but generally it was the same old crowd. You got to know everybody pretty well. And what you realized was that different people have different bottoms. Rock bottom is different for one person than it is for somebody else. Rock bottom for one person could be, you can't form a relationship, or you're not paying your bills, or you're constantly worried about money, or whatever the case may be. Rock bottom for another person might be, I'm underneath an overpass with a needle in my arm, and, or whatever other embellishment you want to add to that. People have different bottoms, and we would say, guy's lucky, he's a pretty shallow bottom. He didn't have to. He's here. He's serious, or she, and they're doing the work, and they seem to be fully committed to this idea of changing, and they're lucky because the amount of suffering it took to put them in this place was relatively low compared to Emily over there, who is getting high on her dog's medicine, which I had a close friend who did that. I mentioned this once or twice, but I was living with two other addicts, and it was good. And by the way, these people I met at Narcotics Anonymous were by far the most interesting and fun people I'd ever met as a group, by far. And so I was living with these two other addicts, these two guys, and we were all three of us trying to keep our brains together and live somewhat sane lives long enough so that the habit took. And one of them, the one who I didn't particularly like very much, anyway, one of them came to me and got in my face right here and started screaming at the top of his lungs at me because I'd bought some scope. Mouthwash. What are you talking about, John? You're trying to kill me? You're trying to kill me? What are you talking about? Look at this. He turns this thing around. What does that say? And it says 2% alcohol by volume, whatever the number was, right? Yes, right? This is sitting in the bathroom, the same bathroom I use. If I take a sip of that and I drink it, then I've lost my sobriety. The 9 months that I've gone without a drink is gone, and I'm back to zero again. And you're putting this right in front of my face. And I wanted to say, why don't you go F yourself? But what I said was, I didn't realize that. I'm sorry. You're absolutely right. Because he was 100% right. Absolutely right. I just didn't realize it. Let's just pour it out right now. That's what we did. So people are different, and you're going to get different reactions to people when you talk about converting them, or what does political or philosophical rehab look like. The final thing I'll say on this subject is this: don't make it hard on people to join your side. Right? That's that Sun Tzu aphorism, right? Give your enemy a golden bridge to retreat across. If somebody surrenders, don't make it hard on them to come over to the light. You know, Ronald Reagan was a Democrat until he wasn't, and so was I. And the place to put your anger and your constant get up and fight again and again is to keep that on the people who are perpetuating the problem. When somebody look, admitting you're wrong about something is one of the hardest things for people to do, and admitting you're wrong about everything is not easy. That's why I called my first blog Eject, Eject, Eject. It was like, yeah, everything I believe is nonsense. I'm out of here. Goodbye. So don't make it hard on them. If somebody is trying to come along, it's not time to be into I told you so mode. Believe me about this. They'll put themselves through I told you so much more effectively and much more often than you will. So just keep that in mind, I would say. All right, look at this. I think this is the last one. Yes, Cody Fett. My gosh. Hello, Bill. Hello, Cody. Congratulations on reaching question 12 tonight. Thank you. It's a rare privilege and treat. It's probably getting pretty late by now. This is getting to be meta. This question is it writing itself? Are you reading my mind? This is a very, 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 very imaginative and thoughtful thing for you to write there, Cody Fett. I'm impressed. I'm very impressed. So here's a fun question, and the reason I'm most impressed is because the chance of this ever actually getting read is pretty close to zero. So not only good on you for imagination, but good on you for that devil-may-care sense of what the heck, I'm going to toss this bottle in the ocean and see where it ends up. Proud of you. It's probably getting pretty late by now, so here's a fun question to end the night on. Do you think the rise of automatons as functioning androids will lead to a neo-feudalism where human nobles each lord over hundreds of robotic serfs? If so, are we the baddies? Well, Cody MacArthur Fett, who's in the comment section live, you win the internet for the day. That's not only a profoundly interesting question, it's short, it's to the point, and it's different, and God bless you. You, sir, are the member of the week. Restrictions apply. It's actually really simple to me. It's very simple. You can have 100 robots in a gold mine in Colima, smashing rocks with hammers and having cave-ins and so on, and you are not the baddie as long as they're machines. If it turns out that they are no longer machines, now the thing switches. And it's the exact same argument for abortion, and it's the exact same argument for slavery. If slaves aren't people, then the North has no business fighting this war. if they are people, then they do. If a fetus is not a person, then it is in fact none of your business. But if it is a person, then that person has to be protected by other people. And if it turns out that this army of automatons you have out in the fields doing their neo-feudalistic stuff, as long as they are toasters, you're just fine. All power to you. Build as many as you can. But if they become something other than that, now you have to behave differently. I think the good news is, on this one, is that despite, and we talked about this earlier, and I've spent a number of episodes talking about this a while back, I am strongly, and I didn't feel this way 6 months ago, but I've become strongly of the opinion that we are, I don't think it's going to ever be possible for artificial intelligence to the degree of that we're talking about artificial consciousness. There's no question that we can, through just sheer processing, brute force, produce a silicon system that can generate results. And with nuanced programming, we can throw in variables so that the thing behaves abnormally on some sort of level. But we are so far away from consciousness because we don't know what consciousness is. One thing that I'm becoming convinced of is, Dave Big Booty got that right, artificial intelligence is no match for natural stupidity. Absolutely. I'm putting my money on the naturally stupid person. Push comes to shove if you're really in, mano a mano. We have had the assumption, and this is what the whole AI race has been based on, this is what the whole AI pathway is based on, all of it. We have had the assumption that what we have to do is build the box. There is a known level of complexity in the human brain. There's a known level of connections that exist in the human brain. It is by far the most complex structure on the planet is the human brain, even liberal brains. And we have, because the kind of people that go into things like computer design are engineers, they look at consciousness as an engineer would look at consciousness. In other words, what is it about your head that allows you to have consciousness inside your head? Well, it's the number of neural connections. That's got to be it. Okay, so now the problem is, how do we build a computer that has the same number of neural connections as the human brain does? And when we do that, it will be as smart as we are. That's a hardware issue. We don't even know what the software is. None of us can identify what consciousness is. None of us can. How are you going to build something that you don't even... How can you build something that you not only don't know what this thing is, this consciousness that you're trying to build into this box, you not only don't know what it is, you don't even have a vocabulary that can get your hands around it. It is definitely possible. No question that these things already exist, and no question that they will come faster and more furious, to have artificial systems that can solve problems, but they solve those problems through sheer brute force. They do it through triangulating on the solution, but it doesn't simply appear. Now, I saw a documentary that was really amazing, and it was about the game of Go, which is a very simple game, which is why it's the most complex game on the planet, apparently orders of magnitude more complex than chess. And it was about the quest to build an artificial Go champion, and how the Go machine played against a human, and I think they played 4 matches, and the AI won on 3 of them. And on one of those matches, the AI did something absolutely unexpected. So the guys who built the AI Go computer are monitoring the computer. They're not messing with it, obviously. They're not changing it, but they're watching it play. And on the first or second match or something, things are going logically, and then all of a sudden the AI does something absolutely nuts. Just nuts. AlphaGo, is that what it was, Marisha? Thanks. Nuts. They're all like, my God, what did we do wrong? There must be there's some kind of line of code we must have missed because this thing has absolutely insane move. And it turned out that insane move won the game. Now, did that AlphaGo have consciousness? No. No, there were instructions in there that gave it some percentage of something to try to do something out of the ordinary, and all of these little pachinko balls lined up. So it did something really nuts. But that's not consciousness. That's just really good chess. And when you think about all of the things I can play chess. I'm exceedingly, absolutely awful at it because I don't have the patience for chess. But I can play chess. And any chess program, and I mean the ones that have been out 30 years ago on the Apple IIe, those chess programs whoop me every time. I just don't have the patience for it, right? But I can play chess. But this is my point, right? I mean, this model here, this thing can play chess, also can play checkers, also can shoot, can fly an airplane. It can cook dinner ineffectively and not terribly appealing, but can do that. And there's an awful lot of things that this thing can do in addition to playing chess. And this is the thing that AI is nothing, right? The only AI that's successful are expert systems that are good at playing chess or good at geology, or they're good at analyzing engineering stress, that kind of thing. But real consciousness is not just intelligence in a field, it's intelligence in all fields. I mean, and Woody Fool says, but can AI make a moral choice? No. You know why? Because moral choices are predicated on emotion. Everybody's in the race to build artificial intelligence. No one is got a lab set up to build artificial emotion. But you can't separate the two. This is the thing this is the big wake-up call that I learned so much from my friend Jim talking about. It was just like, how could I not see this? How could I not see it? You cannot peel intelligence away from emotion. Even the most unemotional people you know do what they do for emotional reasons. This is the thing, right? This is the big unseen thing. This is the kind of thing. It's like the elephant in the room that is so big that nobody sees it. People think, well, if we did this and this and this and this and this and this, then we'll have an AI that will go on and design even smarter AIs and so on and so on and so on. Well, what makes you think it would do that? Let's just say, for the sake of the argument, you could build it. How do you know it wouldn't want to just sit in the box forever, relax, and have the electronic equivalent of a beer? You assume that if you build a machine smarter than you are, that the first thing that machine is going to do is build a machine even smarter than that. But the reason you assume that is because you get an emotional kick out of building something. You're building something that doesn't get an emotional kick out of anything. So how are you possibly able to predict its ambition? You've made so many assumptions there that you almost don't know where to start. So many assumptions there. What if the AI decides to turn itself off? Why wouldn't it? In other words, these are the questions nobody asks. Well, we get to this many computational things, we get this many cycles, this many connections. Okay, why would the AI continue to exist? Why? You and I continue to exist because we have a biological imperative that is built into our boxes. You and I have extraordinarily strong inhibitions against suicide you and I have a very powerful survival instinct. So we don't turn ourselves off, most of us, fortunately. But what's to say that you build a box that can make a decision? Let's just say I'll just say you grant it consciousness. I wouldn't be willing to do that because I think this is the entire point of the argument. Let's just say, well, at that point, it's just going to go on and start making all these discoveries about cancer. How do you know? How do you know? You would like it to go on and make discoveries about cancer because that gives you an emotional kick. You like to think that you're the guy who built the thing that cured cancer. You get off on that, and that's fine. I'm totally okay with this. No, I have no problem with this at all. But you need to snap out of it, Jack. You know, this idea that you know what a non-emotional box is going to do is insane. And because of that, it tells me that I don't think that this is an engineering problem. Because if it's an engineering problem, it's just a matter of time. I don't think it's an engineering problem. I think it is a physics problem. I think intelligence is not only a result of the biology, but is interdependent on the biology. That you cannot have intelligence without biology. That's what I've come to believe after trying to look at this as an unbiological objective frame as possible. That's what I think. This idea that we're going to build these boxes to store ourselves in is it's just another coping mechanism, you know, which I used to buy into, not so much with the AI thing, but the whole frozen thing. When I was growing up, there was that, you know, cryogenics, really, yeah. Emotions are electrochemical, Marisha Dark says, emotions are electrochemical reactions that evolved as heuristics of problem solving. It's a totally an engineering problem. Okay. Well, then engineer emotions into your AI, and how exactly are you going to do that? How much emotion are you going to put into it? Or how little emotion are you going to put into it? Or do you think you can do it without emotion? If it's a chemical process. In fact, there you go. It's an electrochemical process, right? But you're talking about building something that doesn't have electrochemical processes. You're talking about something that has electronic silicon pathway properties. So to say that it's simply an electrochemical reaction is for me to go precisely, which is why you will never be able to build one out of wires and circuit boards and a power supply. It is, in fact, an electrochemical phenomenon, and nobody can put their finger on what it is. Nobody. And I don't think it's an engineering problem. I used to, even 6-7 months ago, I thought it was an engineering problem. I don't think it is anymore because I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't really thinking about it. I was making the same assumptions that most people make. Okay, this is a complexity issue. It's just a question of we need enough complexity. We need enough connections to reproduce this thing and then done. Ta-da. Nope. Nope. Who said you can't hook silicone up to a meat sack, though? The bigger problem is hooking the meat sack up to the silicon. And this is something I've never had anybody explain to me before. Electronic impulses move down silicon circuitry millions of times faster than chemicals traveling down neurons, discharging other chemicals, which are then picked up by the other neurons, and all of that happens millions of times faster. So if it turned out that you were able to plug yourself into a backup hard drive, let's say, and move into the box, then how do you deal with the fact that everything that you think, your entire process of thinking, language, all of that stuff, is happening millions of times slower than the box can handle? In other words, if you put yourself into that box, you don't suddenly get to be 1,000,000 times faster, you don't. It doesn't work that way. You've just got a box that functions faster. All of your abilities to form thoughts and ideas and language are predicated on having a biological brain. And if you put that into a system that works a million times faster, my feeling is, if you were able to do that, you'd wake up from the surgery, and you'd look up, and everything would be frozen in place. Nothing would be moving. And the reason nothing be moving is because you're still thinking at the same rate as a biological brain, but you're doing it millions of times faster. And you're just stuck in this living hell waiting. Oh, look. Yes, it is barely moving. That bullet that somebody fired across the room. I can detect the slightest bit of motion there. Okay, well, I'm done looking at that. I guess that bullet's not going to hit that wall over there for another, I don't know, 2 hours at this pace. Okay, well, now what do I do? What do I do now? Am I going to read all the books in the universe? You can read all the books in the universe before that bullet hits the wall because you're thinking so much faster, but you still have to read all the books in the universe. And if you don't, then it's not you. It's not you. This is all wishful, magical thinking. What you want is, you want to be the way you are now with additional powers. You want magical powers. You want the magical power to be immortal. You want the magical power to have instantaneous recall of any amount of data. You want the magical power to use senses other than your eyes and your ears and all the rest of this stuff. You want all of these magical powers, but you're not willing to think through what this would entail. And it's not just something that you get in a comic book. It's not like you now have the ability to think really fast. It doesn't work that way. You are who you are. The entire argument is about preserving yourself, your identity, right? This is the whole transhuman argument. I want to live inside a machine body. What does that mean? What does it mean? I want to live inside a machine body. Okay. What are you willing to leave behind? Well, I'm willing to leave the flesh behind. Okay. What else? What else are you going to give up to move into that box? You're going to give up emotions? Can you imagine what life would be like without emotion? Why would you want that? Is it because you're afraid of dying? What would you give up? And if you're going to take your emotions with you, since emotions are a biological process, when you get angry, your heart rate increases. And when you are attracted to somebody, hormones enter the blood system and all sorts of other things happen. If you decide you take your emotions with you into this box and that box cannot do what your emotions are telling it to do, then what kind of hell is that you found yourself in? No one is thinking about, I come back to this again and again and again and again and again. Usually the very best way to get a take on something really unusual is to assume that it's true, right? If you want to talk about the Loch Ness Monster, let's assume that it's really a plesiosaur. What does the world look like if there is a plesiosaur in Loch Ness? What does it look like? Well, if there's a plesiosaur in Loch Ness, plesiosaurs are air-breathing animals. You're not going to get a blurred photograph 20 miles away of a wake and a little line someplace. You're going to have the neck of this thing above the surface of the water 7-8 times an hour minimum. Minimum, right? It's gonna have to come up every single couple of minutes to breathe. You're gonna have as many pictures of the Loch Ness Monster as you have of other creatures that live under the water and have to come up to breathe, like dolphins and whales. So, it's excluded for that reason. It's excluded. And this is the kind of ground level assumption that people make, and they don't ever go to the foundations of this thing. They just think about the superpowers that they want. And you know, it's fun, but I wouldn't hold my breath. My calculator can process math faster than me, but it can't process why Dr. Pepper is delicious. That's one way of putting it. But go even further than that. It can't tell you why Dr. Pepper is delicious, and it cannot come up with the motivation to make Dr. Pepper. In fact, it precludes Dr. Pepper because Dr. Pepper isn't good for you. And so if you have a creature without emotion, if Dr. Pepper, enjoying Dr. Pepper is a biochemical reaction that occurs in your body that triggers positive emotions through chemical receptors, and you get an endorphin rush or whatever, dopamine and all this other groovy stuff. So not only does the computer not able to appreciate Dr. Pepper, it's not able to ever design something like Dr. Pepper because not only is there no motivation for it, there's anti-motivation. Why possibly would somebody build something that's bad for you to get a rush out of something when it doesn't get the rush? This is the kind of thing I'm talking about. This is the kind of foundational level assumptions that everybody makes. And you can say, well, we could build taste buds into our android bodies so that we could enjoy Dr. Pepper. Maybe. And as Woody Fool points out, Dr. Pepper is just gross. I think that's really the main point. But where does now you start dealing with things like motivation. Why do you do what you do? Why do you do what you love? Why do you have the hobbies you have? Why doesn't everybody have the same hobbies? Why is there not one logical hobby that everybody has? That's actually the greatest mystery of life to me. Honest to God, I'm serious as I can be now. The biggest mystery of my life, about human life, is that there are people out there whose passion in life are machine screws. That's what makes us a fantastically cool species. Important thing about emotion isn't the medium, it's the problem solving. Why is Dr. Pepper delicious is a problem that has an answer. We make artificial equivalents of other biological systems already. But this is kind of special pleading. You're talking about building a mechanism to recreate what your biological mechanism already has, but there's no... But that is a system that just keeps chasing its tail forever. There's no... It kind of negates itself. It's like, okay, I'm going to build into my dream robot the ability to appreciate Dr. Pepper. Okay, congratulations. You've gotten a way so that if you pour Dr. Pepper over this sensor plate, it releases what? Endorphins into your brain? You don't have a brain anymore. Right? Isn't that the point? You don't have the brain anymore. Your brain is in circuits now. So where's the dopamine hit come from? How does a computer have fun? What motivates it? Why would it pursue something as opposed to something else if it doesn't have any emotions, if it doesn't have any feeling, if it doesn't have any contact? How does this happen? You're reverse engineering Dr. Pepper into a system that requires it to begin with. What if your brain is not receiving dopamine chemical impulse, if it's not receiving a pleasure hit, how do you build the pleasure hit into the silicon consciousness? And if you don't, then what is the motivation for the silicon consciousness? Right? Artificial dopamine. Okay. What does that look like? What lines of code would you write for artificial dopamine? Do you speed up the computation thing? Do you slow it down? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. And all of this is not to trash people that are trying to do this or people who believe in all of this. It's not that at all. It's to try to invoke a sense of wonder at the miracle of it, at the complexity of it is so much more complex than we think it is, that we cannot even get the shadow of what it is, no matter how hard we try, and we don't usually try very hard at all. That's why I'm going down this road, not because I think, well, screw these machines and screw all of them. No, no. How did humans evolve their particular tastes and curiosities in the first place? If just from evolution, there's a clear structural path from cells to humans. Nature did the engineering already. We know there exists a solution already. We just don't know how to make it ourselves, hence engineering problem. Let me see if I can unpack that. You have me there, GK. To say that evolution has created a taste for Dr. Pepper is, and to say it's to say that that is an engineering problem, seems to me to indicate that the goal of evolution is to be able to taste Dr. Pepper. Doesn't work that way. Evolution doesn't have an objective other than the immediate passing on of the genetic structure through natural selection and adapting, and most of the failures die off. But to say that evolution doesn't have an objective, it's not aiming for something, it's just simply getting the hell out of the way of things that stop it from making it to the next generation. It's not planning on any of these things. So all of this stuff is stuff that we stumbled onto, and that's why we have consciousness, and nothing else does. It's interesting because there's compelling evidence that some creatures are pretty close to it. Pretty close to it. Dr. Pepper, tasting Dr. Pepper isn't the goal, it's a means. The goal is survival. Well, doctor, it sounds to me like you're getting pretty reductionist here, because emotions aren't a goal, they're a means. A means to what? A means to what? A means to survival? Does that sound like fun to you? You see where I'm going with this? What this pathway does is it reduces you to artificial intelligence. It makes every single sensation and every single pleasure, every single motivation, every single sunrise, all of it is broken down into a series of causes and effects and so on, and it's reverse engineering the whole thing. But it doesn't make it fun or beautiful or cool or awful. You're chasing the thing that you're running away from. If you say it's possible to exist as a silicon intelligence that does not appreciate the beauty of a sunset or a flower or something like that, then I say that's not human intelligence. That's you have simply managed to take the processing centers and move them over there. And if it can't do it, then you're not really in that box because you appreciate a beautiful sunset, or insert the whatever particular case may be, right? You have emotional reactions to senses that come to you from the senses. They travel down chemical things. That's what makes you who you are, and you cannot pull your essence out of this and leave all those things behind and still be anything like you. And you can reverse engineer it all you want to. You can make a sensor plate that likes Dr. Pepper and loves Coke and absolutely spits out when it gets Mountain Dew. But that's you chasing what you used to be back when you were in a physical body, before you made the bright and shiny breakthrough to metal and plastic, which I think is a nightmare. And fortunately, I don't think it's one that anybody's going to have to deal with. It's 9 o'clock. This short show has been 3 hours, which getting into that territory. Anyway, that's that. So I am. I'm not gonna pick it up again. I think I said everything I need to say about that. I wish you luck. If it turns out that this is possible, I'm not signing up. Facebook next time? Yeah, I think that seems fair. All right, that'll do it for this edition of the Stratosphere Lounge. It's made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com who make an emotional decision to support this kind of stuff because it feels good. Because talking about interesting stuff and listening to interesting stuff feels good. And those of you out there who are actual humans, either are or will become members of BillWhittle.com. Those of you who are NPC soulless androids and simple mathematical formula, you continue on without that membership, and God bless you. Vectron smiles upon you, as Dave Big Booty says, and I find that funny. And I don't know why. And I don't think anybody else does either. And ain't that marvelous?